So I just wanted to talk about Crawford versus Canelo for a bit. I've had a lot of thoughts on Crawford versus Canelo, and I've gone back and forth on when to make my first Crawford Canelo video. But I'm from New York, and in the last few days they had this New York press conference, and in the comment sections online and just the zeitgeist online is, this is just all for show, right? These are two guys who respect each other. These are two professionals. These are two of the best in the business. There doesn't need to be this big press tour. There doesn't need to be this big media tour. The real boxing fans know that it's going to be decided in the ring, and that's what we want to see. Why are we already talking about this fight when it's not until September? Why are we already doing press conferences? However, there was one thing that I wanted to talk about, and it was something that Terence Crawford said that made my ears stand up. As a Terence Crawford fan, as a loyal Terence Crawford fan, as someone who's loved Terence Crawford as a fighter for a long time, Terence Crawford is one of the fighters where I knew I loved boxing when I watched Terence Crawford. He was one of those dudes. When I was getting into this sport at first, I was like, oh man, watch him work. When I watch his footwork, his switch hitting stance, his offensive arsenal, he's an amazing fighter, right? But when Canelo derided him for something that he's very commonly derided for, which is having a weak resume, Terence Crawford said, when Canelo said, who's the best fighter you fought? Terence Crawford said, Victor Postal. My ear was like, what? Dude, I hate this sport sometimes. Terence, who is Victor Postal? And if you're watching this and you're going, oh, Victor Postal was great. He was. Victor Postal was a very good fighter. But this is something that I think a lot of people in boxing sort of struggle to understand, especially given that the sport, to be honest, of course, has waned in popularity since the retirement of Mayweather, since the rise of the UFC. It's just more of a struggle to build stars in the sport. And it speaks in that way that the biggest star in the sport is Canelo, right? Boxing had to return to the place where it is most popular, to the place where it is the national pastime, to find its biggest star. Is he the number one pound for pound fighter in the world? He's definitely top 5 and has been for longer than anybody else, right? He, of course, deserves all the plaudits that he's gotten, and he does. Nobody can deny have a far stronger resume than Terence Crawford, right? So for Canelo, it was certainly a moment that landed. And like Terence Crawford, you're putting people in a position where for some reason we have to come out and like defend Victor Postal. And here's the funny thing to me. You could have just said Sean Porter. And the average person, the average casual fan would just go, yeah, I think I've heard of Sean Porter before. And no one ever would have thought anything of it. But as an actual true boxing fan, it is really interesting. Right? Because Terence Crawford just said that Victor Postal gave him the hardest fight of anybody in his whole career. And that's a really interesting tidbit. That's a really interesting piece of information as a boxing fan. It makes me want to go back and watch Terence Crawford versus Victor Postal again. But of course, it brings to mind the obvious elephant in the room. So this is clearly Crawford's toughest fight, right? I mean, was there something to that of him like, oh, Victor Postal is better than you, Canelo? I mean, if Crawford thinks that, he's in for a world of hurt in September. He's going to get his ass handed to him. I don't think he does think that. I think he's chasing this fight with Canelo because he wants the challenge. He wants the greatest challenge of his career, and it's a massive part of why this fight hypes itself. And the massive media tour has never really made all that much sense to me.